Right now, right now. 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 Oh, I got a real good feeling.
We try to bring you high-quality educational and informational content every single day. Why do you think the price is having such an anemic time? The news story of the hour. Jump onto the chart. Is this the beginning of a massive financial unraveling? We got to add a little addendum to the show map today. Shall we start here on the daily? Now, we've been looking at the RSI on Bitcoin's daily chart for the last several days. It always has been, but it's been increasing over the last 50 years since the government has been Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and welcome back to Coffee and Crypto Live. This is your weekly morning show where we bring you the latest in everything Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about how JP Chase, one of the largest banks in the world, managing over $4 trillion in assets, is now bringing Bitcoin-backed loans to their product lineup. The reason that this is so significant is because this has been a very large growing section of DeFi in the cryptocurrency space as of late. The fact that we're seeing this out of JP Chase means that we are seeing mass adoption. Today, we're going to talk about a few things. First and foremost, we are going to talk about the mass adoption going on right now. We've been talking for a long time about how we are looking forward to mass adoption. We're looking forward to Bitcoinization. We're looking forward to supercycle. Right now, we are seeing a great deal of that happening in front of our eyes. So we're going to go over a lot of those different stories to know that Bitcoin is being mass adopted even if retail is silent. After that, we're also going to talk about the price, because I firmly believe that Bitcoin is going to be seeing a $125,000 price before you know it. But are we going to see a correction first? You see, Bitcoin right now is painting this head and shoulders pattern. And despite the fact that we've been above $100,000 for almost a month, we still do have quite a few bearish technicals that have not finished playing out. Are we about to go into a major drop? And that'll finally lead us to the ultimate question on all of our minds, on my mind and on your mind, is should we be buying right now? Or should we wait a little while? We're going to talk about all of that and more in today's episode. Apologies for being late, guys. It has been a very, very rough few months, as you know. Trying to get used to life back here after Vegas has been wild. I mean, the time change and just looking forward to getting back into the groove, which we're trying to do right now. So let's enjoy the stream. We'll read some chat real quick. Let's pull that up. Donnie Myers is in chat. Michael Mann is in chat. Miguel Orengel is in chat. Chino, Donnie, RJ. Cherry City Bullies, Ian is in chat, The Drake Equation, Abraham Lee, Kryptoni's in chat, it's Remy No Limits. Good to see you, man. It was good to meet you, Remy, out in Vegas. Got to talk to him for a little bit in the Palazzo. Actually, I think we were under the Venetian when we ran into each other. Big Boss Man said, looking good, Jeb. Good to see you. Mattis S is in chat. Vitruvian Maniac is in chat. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Tell me what you think about the new mic cover. It was time for an update. Time for an upgrade. Our brand colors, the Crypto Jeb brand colors, are blue and red. So tell me what you think in the chat. Would love to know whether or not you like the new mic cover. If not, I can always go back to having a new black one. But I like the red. We're going to try it out for a little bit. Maybe it can be our signature look. All right, let's do this. We got a lot to cover. Jumping on over to CoinMarketCap to get things kicked off. Bitcoin is currently trading at $105,200. We have gone through a slight corrective movement over the last week and a half. We went into a major rally leading into Bitcoin 2025, which was a phenomenal conference. I got to meet a lot of you guys there. I probably met 200 or 300 fans. I even got to meet David Bailey, the man that put it on. Met a lot of the people in the Bitcoin Magazine team. Met a lot of you guys. Was very excited about the conference. Here's the problem. When the conference happened, we saw a talk from a very particular individual whose name you may know, that goes by the likes of JD Vance. Unfortunately, JD Vance announced a lot of nothing. We were hoping that JD Vance was going to announce that we were now selling gold at the federal level to buy Bitcoin. That didn't happen. And because that didn't happen, Bitcoin broke an uptrending level of support that it had been maintaining for a very long time. We maintained it all the way through the month of April and the month of May. That trend line broke and we went into a much needed corrective movement, largely because on the daily chart, we have bearish RSI divergence. You can see that playing out from the daily all the way up to the weekly chart. We've got a downtrend on the RSI. We've got an uptrend on the price action, which gives us bearish RSI divergence, which gives us bearish pressure. The question now becomes, with that massive bearish RSI divergence, with this massive triangle pattern that we were in, it was actually really an ascending wedge, and we broke bearish out of it. Where's the bottom? Is the bottom in or not? That's the question that we've got to discuss. We're going to talk fundamentals, then we're going to talk technicals. Right now, we're doing our market overview. I really need to get a little thing down here on the bottom of the screen that shows you where we are in the show lineup. Pretty simple. I like to keep things very simple, but I'll go ahead and tell you right now, we're kind of doing our overview. We're going to talk fundamentals, then we're going to talk technicals and price and where we want to go from here. Should we be buying? Should we be waiting? What's our strategy? How do we make money? What's our long-term forecast, etc.? Let's continue with our overview. We do have a possibility that altcoin season is starting. Now, we've had a little bit of excitement about the altcoins. A lot of people are very excited about altcoins because the altcoin season so far this cycle has been absolutely terrible. If you're in altcoins, you have gotten left behind on just about everything. You've been just about completely left behind by Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been doing extremely well. Yesterday was Bitcoin season. Last week was Bitcoin season. Last month was Bitcoin season. Bitcoin is dominating. There are two major theories as to what's going on right now with Bitcoin's market dominance compared to the rest of the space. The first theory, and the theory that I honestly subscribe to myself, is that Bitcoin's market dominance has been exploding ever since the bear market bottom. As you can see right here, it's just on a continual warpath to the upside. I believe that this is an early sign of mass adoption. As we will be talking about as this stream moves forward, there is mass adoption going on of Bitcoin right now. This is no longer something that we are looking forward to. This is something that is happening as we speak. We are witnessing mass adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies right now. And it shouldn't surprise any of us that that mass adoption is starting with the institutions. The institutions are older and wiser than most retail. That's why they have a lot of money. That's why they end up winning, because they're smarter and wiser than retail. It should not surprise anyone that we're seeing a massive institutional bull market right now and retail sleeping, because whereas retail thinks, $100,000 a coin, that's too much. I can't afford that. The institutions understand that the deficit at the federal level for the United States, the deficit at the federal level for Japan, BOE, the European banks, all of them, these deficits are going to drive rampant inflation, and this rampant inflation will drive, ultimately, the collapse of every modern fiat currency. These companies understand that, and that's why we're seeing Bitcoin's dominance climb so rapidly, and you've seen Ethereum lose half of its market dominance. The others category lose 25 to 30% of its market dominance. You've seen so much market dominance lost to the altcoins, to Bitcoin, because it is now becoming extremely apparent that Bitcoin is the future. I've been in the cryptocurrency space for over half of Bitcoin's history, or just about half of Bitcoin's history. I'm one of the oldest cryptocurrency YouTubers in the space, not in age-wise, but as far as how long I've been in this industry. I have watched this chart nearly every day for almost a decade. The last 18 months, when BlackRock got approved for the ETF, Fidelity got approved for the ETF, the two big juggernauts, Strategy started mass acquiring Bitcoin. Now you've got a litany of dozens of other companies doing the exact same thing. That was when Bitcoin transitioned, in my mind, from a speculative asset that we hoped would be institutionalized and adopted in the future, to, in the last 18 months, it's become very apparent to me that a $1 million Bitcoin is guaranteed. It is going to happen. It's going to happen. There's only two reasons why it wouldn't. Number one, government stopped deficit spending. Ha! That's hilarious. Ha ha ha! Whew! Whew! Man, I'll open a comedy club. Two, quantum computing cracks Bitcoin. We already have a lot of quantum resistance built into the Bitcoin algorithm, and it's very easy to upgrade the Bitcoin algorithm to be quantum resistant. Those are the only two risk factors, the risk factors that Bitcoin has, and neither of them are serious concerns, certainly not for the next 10 years. A $1 million per Bitcoin price is programmed in. It is going to happen with like 99% certainty. The question is not if, the question has now become when, since we've seen this institutional adoption. The Democratic Party, if they get back into power in the at the midterms, or if they get back into power during the next presidency, will not be able to run a platform of being anti-cryptocurrency, because under the Trump administration, it is becoming institutionalized. It is becoming ingrained in our culture. Operation Choke Point 3.0 is never going to happen, because it would be political suicide for any party that would try it. And so Bitcoin is now no longer under the auspices of maybe it's going to be the future. We know for an absolute fact, at least in my opinion, that it is. That is not the case for the altcoins. Every single altcoin still carries a great degree of risk of not being adopted or being competed into oblivion. Bitcoin has basically won the altcoin wars. Are the altcoins going to zero? No, they're going to do very well. But the next 10 years are Bitcoin's time. This is why we put everything we buy right now into Bitcoin. That's why I'm solo in Bitcoin. Are we going to see an alt season? Probably. After Bitcoin has a blow off top, you probably will see an alt season. Alts are very coiled. They're very constrained. They have a lot of potential energy. They could break out at any moment. Okay, I'm not saying there's not going to be an alt season, but generally the next 10 years, the story is going to be Bitcoin. You will then, as Bitcoin enters into the limelight where it belongs, you will see the altcoins coming up behind it, and you will be able to get bigger gains in certain altcoins. And then you'll lose them because that altcoin will no longer be competitive because there's a lot more turmoil going on. You have to understand that there's a difference between Bitcoin and the altcoins. Bitcoin is not an asset. It is an entire asset class. There is no competing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has left the minor leagues of competing with other altcoins. It has now entered the big leagues of competing with gold. We now need to stop comparing Bitcoin to altcoins. We need to compare Bitcoin to gold, and we need to stop comparing the altcoins to Bitcoin. We need to start comparing the altcoins to each other. They are in two different categories. The categorization of how we look at this is off. We should be looking at Bitcoin's dominance against gold, and we should be looking at Ethereum and Cardano and Solana's dominance against each other. That's my 2 cents on that. Kelly's in chat. Good to see you, man. Good to see you at the conference. Jeb, great reconnecting in Vegas. Let's get you on BitLab soon, and me back on the place it all began. Crypto Jeb, big love to you, homie. Likewise, Kelly, would love to have you on the stream. Would love to collaborate with you over there. Guys, make sure that you stay tuned because there are dozens of partnerships I'm working on right now of doing different, not even so much partnerships, but collaborations I'm working on of going on other people's channels, having people on here. So stay tuned. A lot of community building is on the horizon. Very, very, very excited to get plugged back in and reconnected. It's so amazing how much just honor people showed me at the conference. I did not expect that. I really did not expect that. I walked into the conference thinking nobody was going to have a clue who I was. People were going to say, he's over the hill. Everybody walked up to me and was like, Jeb, what's up? I love you, dude. Like, it was so encouraging. Thank you. Thank you to everybody that I met at the conference. It was really amazing seeing the outpouring of support and love and to hear all the stories of how what we've been doing here over the years has benefited you guys. I mean, some of you guys had just some very, very, very heartfelt stories of what you've learned from us, and very excited about that. Cool. All right, so we've talked about whether or not alt season is coming. Alt season is going to come. It's going to. You're going to have to be patient because Bitcoin is, Big Daddy Bitcoin. It's the OG It's the OG cryptocurrency. It's going to happen. So let's talk a little bit now that we've kind of done the overview. And by the way, just continuing the overview, Ethereum is doing very well. Ethereum is potentially entering into a season of gains. I could see Ethereum doing very well over the next little bit. It's basically trading sideways right now. But if we are able to, here, we'll go to the actual chart. If we are able to break out of this level of resistance right here of about $2,700, Ethereum would probably go through a major rally back up to $4,000. From there, you have to see whether or not you're going to actually break through it. As you can see, we've been doing charting on Ethereum for years. Right? I bought Ethereum at $130. I'm not an Ethereum hater. Right? We hold a lot of Ethereum from much lower prices than we have right now. I do think that Ethereum has a very good future, and I'm happy with the Ethereum that we hold. But as I said, the next 10 years, not the next 10 months, the next 10 years are going to be the season of Bitcoin. So let's talk a little bit about the fundamentals. I want to go over a lot of different reasons why I am basically considering a $1 million Bitcoin to be inevitable. We have to first start with an understanding of fiat currency. Now, this might be review for some of you. But even if it's review, don't click away because this may end up being something, maybe you learn something about how to explain this. You can explain this to other people and orange pill them. When I talk to people that I don't know, there are really two things that I like to talk to them about, three things I like to talk to them about. I like to talk to them about Jesus. I like to talk to them about how amazing my family is. And I also like to talk to them about Bitcoin, because I try and share the gospel with people. I try and tell them how great my wife and kids are, and I try and orange pill them. That's what I try and do. I'm very upfront about that. You know, we probably took 20 Ubers while we were in Vegas. I talked about either Bitcoin, Jesus, or both of those with probably almost every single Uber driver. And I want to share with you how you can orange pill people. Why is Bitcoin going to $1 million? The reason that Bitcoin is going to $1 million is because of the fiat system that we live with right now. A couple of charts. Let me bring up. Let me see if I can pull this up. Let's see here. I'm sure this is something that I can pull up. I need to just grab the ticker symbol. Here we go. Yep. USGDG. Let's see if I can pull that up over here. USGDG. All right, so here you go. This is the United States government debt to GDP ratio over the last 80 years. This is the ratio of debt to GDP. What does that mean? Well, if the United States' GDP is about $35 trillion, $30 trillion, let's pull up debtclock.org here, get some information. Let's pull up the usdebtclock.org. You can see that the United States' gross domestic product is approximately $30 trillion. Our gross national debt is approximately $37 trillion. We just passed 36 on to 37 because the sky's the limit, right? If you look at the debt to GDP ratio, you can see the debt to GDP ratio has been substantially increasing ever since about 1981. That's an important time because this time right down here where we were the lowest was the decade immediately following something called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Now, at Bretton Woods, a lot of things happened, and we're not going to go into all of it today, but to a great degree, we went off the gold standard. As you can see, before we went off the gold standard, the United States debt to GDP ratio was decreasing. Before we went off the gold standard, the U.S. debt to GDP ratio was decreasing following the end of the Second World War. After we went off the gold standard, U.S. debt started to climb rapidly. And the reason that occurred was because we began the debasement of currency so that politicians could get elected, and their chief way of getting elected was by promising you crap we can't afford. The politicians promised you, healthcare for all. They promised you, Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security benefit, all these different things. That, free, subsidized housing, Section 8, all these things that sound good and are not necessarily bad in principle, but when enacted by the United States government, explode. They get taken advantage of. They are mishandled. They are subject to fraud. Right? When these things are occurring, then the U.S. expenditure moonshots, and that leads to something called deficit spending. Deficit spending is the difference between how much the United States government takes in revenues and how much the government spends. So the U.S. federal deficit right now is approximately $2 trillion, and that's probably going to grow over the next 5 years as expenses for the United States government continue to grow. So, for example, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, and interest on the debt, the four biggest line items in the budget, these are categories that are expected to grow dramatically over the next 5 years, even with Trump in office. We can try to grow GDP faster than debt, which would drive down debt to GDP ratio, but it wouldn't work. So here's a little bit of the way this works. This is a little bit like you having 110% LTV ratio on a Bitcoin-backed loan. You have $30 trillion of annual GDP, and you have $36 trillion in debt. If this were a Bitcoin collateralized loan, which we're going to talk about in a second, you would be liquidated. And that's truly what's happening right now. Before long, probably within the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to see the United States interest on debt overtake or nearly overtake tax revenue. Unless you grow the economy extremely quickly and cut taxes so that you end up raising taxes in the long run because of the increased revenues for the overall economy, the interest on the debt is probably going to increase. This debt to GDP ratio moonshotting has affected the U.S. 30-year Treasury bond, which is how the United States government finances its debt. It borrows money from the American people and from other nations. And as you can see here, ever since the COVID-19 crash, we've seen a massive uptick on the interest rate on the debt. The United States used to be able to finance deficit spending with near free debt Over 30 years on a $100,000 treasury, they'd pay $30,000. That's basically nothing. That's virtually nothing. That has increased fivefold to 5%. A great number of treasuries are now going to have to be reacquired by the United States Treasury at a higher rate, which means that the interest rate is increasing. This number, $1 trillion per year on interest, used to be $300 billion 4 years ago. In 4 years, if that happens again, we're looking at $4 trillion a year in interest on the debt, and you could be looking at a bond market where the bond rate is not 4%, but like it was back in the 80s, it's 10%. That can happen. And so we've got to be very careful to assume that the fiat system is going to exist forever, because it's not. And the big institutions that see what's playing out in the United States bond market, that see what's playing out in the inflation of the dollar, if you look at USCPI, United States Core Producer Price Index, right? You can see there has been a dramatic amount of inflation over the last 4 years, 25%, officially reported. The official reports are that we've seen 25% inflation in the last 4 years, 4.5, 5 years. That's 4 to 5% a year, which is nonsense. We know that's not true because just about everything and anything that you can buy is up 50% or more in the last 5 years. This is bogus data. We're seeing more like 10 to 12% inflation a year rather than 4 or 5% a year. The debasement of fiat currency means that your currency is losing its value at an extremely rapid pace. And it also means that Bitcoin is going to gain value at an extremely rapid pace because people are tired of the dollar. And so the question now becomes, which side do you want to be in? Do you want to be long Bitcoin, which is the opposite of the dollar? It's growing in value because of its limited supply. The dollar is losing its value because of its infinite supply. Or do you want to be short Bitcoin by being in dollars? Make no mistake, if you're in Bitcoin, then you are long Bitcoin. If you are in dollars, you are short Bitcoin. Do you want to short the dollar? Or do you want to short Bitcoin? Would you rather long the currency that we know for an absolute fact is going to continue to lose value every year? Or do you want to long the currency that we have every possible reason to believe is going to be worth $1 million in 10 years? Which one would you rather long? All right, now let's back up. Let's talk about some of these big companies, right? Let's see. It's not going to take. We can go on Twitter and I don't know. There we go. It took me 3 seconds. Found this from Cointelegraph. Corporate treasuries now hold over 3% of all Bitcoin, with 60 plus firms doubling their Bitcoin holdings in the last 2 months. Over 60 firms have doubled their Bitcoin position within 60 days. MicroStrategy holds 580,000 Bitcoin. I'm not sure why Mara isn't on here, but they hold 49,000 Bitcoin. They're a big miner. They mined like 1,000 Bitcoin in the last quarter. Galaxy Digital, they hold 13,000. Block holds 8,000. Block, they just announced that, a lot of things going on with Block. Metaplanet is actually, that's outdated data. This isn't 7,800 anymore. It's like 8,888. GameStop acquired 4,710. They're probably going to acquire more than that. Similar, Nexon, Fold's a big one, right? XXI. These big companies are acquiring Bitcoin hand over fist, hand over foot, whatever it is. Who knows? I don't have any idea. Right? This is the future. And these companies understand that instead of putting their cash in the United States dollar to hold for 10 years, they should put it in Bitcoin to hold for 10 years. And the reason, and this is where we're going to tie what the institutions are doing to what we should be doing. The reason that they're doing this is because they're standing on sturdy foundations. They understand how to build enough revenue to be profitable for the next 10 years, to weather Bitcoin's extreme volatility. They understand how to remain profitable and existent and solvent during a bear market. They understand how to weather Bitcoin retracing down to $50,000 or $60,000, where it could go during the bear market. Jeb, you're a heretic. $60,000. We'll never see that again. You might. You don't know. We could also jump to 400. Bear markets at 150. Who knows? But these companies understand how to weather that storm and hold for 10 years. What's 10 years? It's 2 market cycles. They understand how to hold for 2 bear markets. And they don't need to touch this Bitcoin for a long time. And so because of that longer time horizon, it leads to them dumping an enormous amount of cash into Bitcoin. We need to think like the whales. We need to think like these companies. They are adopting Bitcoin because they have the appropriate time horizon. This is why in today's stream, we're looking at fundamentals before price action, because price action looks a little bearish right now. But we have to understand fundamentals before we make a move at the price action so that we can make the proper long-term decisions. If you expect to be alive in 10 years and still be able to enjoy life, it makes more sense than in any other market to buy and acquire Bitcoin because of the fundamental intrinsic value that is being pumped into this space. 18 months ago, Strategy was the only company forging ahead with a Bitcoin treasury. Now you've got 30 companies that are doing the exact same thing. 18 to 24 months ago, you didn't have any Bitcoin ETFs. Now Bitcoin ETFs hold over 700,000 Bitcoin. This is just the beginning. We've been wanting to see for a long time hyper Bitcoinization. We've been waiting for a long time to see mass adoption. It is here. It is here. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? Are you going to miss the train and regret that decision for the rest of your life? Or are you going to do everything you can to remain solvent? In other words, you're paying off all your consumer debt. You have savings, you have a steady job, but then you're dumping money into Bitcoin as fast as you can. Are you doing that or not? And if not, you have to reckon with yourself why. If you're not acquiring Bitcoin, that's fine, but you need to understand why you're doing that, and you need to challenge that belief, because I think it's foolish. If you're about to go bankrupt, buying Bitcoin might not be the right move. But if you're in a stable financial position and you have the ability to store away money, why wouldn't you buy Bitcoin and hold it for 10 years? Seriously, why wouldn't you? So that's the fundamental part of our stream today. I also want to talk about the technicals because, as I said, the technicals have a lot to say. Right now, we have we have an ascending level of resistance on Bitcoin. It's not quite a double top, thank God, but we do have ascending resistance right here. That comes along with our downtrending level of resistance on RSI, which means we have bearish RSI divergence. I'm going to kind of wreck your world here a little bit, but you're going to be glad I did. This does indicate that we'd likely see more of a drop than we've seen. Over the last few days, we've seen a dead cat bounce off of 103, which very well could mean that we would see a lower low. We've got a bear flag right here. It very well could mean that we see a lower low right back down to 100,000. We could easily break out of this in the next couple of days, back test 100,000. Now, the good news is we've been above 100,000 for over 30 days. That tells me that $100,000 is now the floor for Bitcoin. $100,000 being the floor for Bitcoin doesn't mean that we couldn't go back to $80,000 for a few weeks or a month or two. But what it does mean is that Bitcoin is more comfortable right now trading above $100,000 than it is trading below $100,000. And that is becoming more true every single day. If we look at the 20 weekly exponential moving average, let's look at the weekly. If we look at the 20 weekly exponential moving average, it is nearly the case that Bitcoin would rather be above $100,000 over the last 20 weeks than below. The 20 weekly moving average is now higher than it was back here, which means Bitcoin, let's back up and explain how the 20 weekly exponential moving average works, right? The 20 weekly exponential moving average takes the average of the last 20 weeks, average price action. Bitcoin on average is more comfortable above $100,000 than it was back here because the 20 WEMA is higher. You can see the 20 WEMA is sitting at 95. Back here is sitting at 91. The 20 weekly average price on Bitcoin, therefore, is 95,000, which is in comparison to in February, where it was at $90,000. In other words, Bitcoin is much more comfortable at $100,000 than it used to be. Even if we drop a little bit below here, this 20 weekly exponential moving average mustn't be ignored. All right. So what could happen here? Well, there are a great number of things that could happen here. We could drop back down to $100,000 and then fall all the way back down to the 20 weekly exponential moving average, bounce off and go to $150,000. We could also, on the other hand, fall back down to the bottom of this uptrending trading channel. We've got this level of resistance, and we've got this level of support, and we've got this midline. I drew this the other night while I was doing some TA to establish whether or not we were going to get better entries. Based on this, it is very possible that Bitcoin is sitting on its middle line right here. We might need to backtest down to $87,000 to $90,000 before bouncing and continuing the rally. This is very, very much possible. Well, Jeb, I thought we were never going to see sub $100,000 again. Well, we might not. But there's also a great possibility that we do. And if we do, it's not something that you should fret about, because a $90,000 Bitcoin is an excellent place to enter. It's an excellent entry opportunity. Bitcoin has followed this trading channel ever since the very beginning of this bull market. So why wouldn't we continue it? Therefore, I believe that a drop down to about $87,000 to $90,000 makes the most sense. I wish that Bitcoin had have rallied all the way up to this level of resistance, up to $125,000 to $130,000 before entering his back test, because it would have taken more time, and a back test down to about $100,000 may have been more appropriate. But I hope that we see a drop down to $90,000, and here's exactly why. If we see a drop down to $90,000, it greatly decreases the likelihood of a short-term bear market. Massively decreases the likelihood of a short-term bear market. The reason for that is because it would mean that Bitcoin is going through a perfect amount of consolidation. It means that instead of looking at a double top as we saw in 2021, instead we're looking at proper consolidative movements like what we saw in 2017, where Bitcoin rallies, has a healthy correction, rallies, has a healthy correction, rallies, has a healthy correction. The entire reason that the 2018 bear market occurred was because this correction right here was not deep enough. In fact, the very first video we ever uploaded to this channel on November 16th, 2017 was detailing just that. The first video on this channel, we said that Bitcoin did not correct enough and Bitcoin needs to go through a much larger correction. That ended up playing out in the 2018 bear market. It's not exactly what we called a bear market, but we said, look, this is overextended and Bitcoin, the payment's going to come due. Right? Bitcoin only corrected here 30%. So far in the bull market in 2016 and 17, we'd corrected 40%. I said this correction was not deep enough, and so therefore the payment will come due, and Bitcoin will have to correct this. And it did. We ended up rallying up to $20,000 and going through a massive crash. All right, so what are we looking at right now? We're looking at something very similar. We're looking at an era here where Bitcoin needs to have a healthy correction, because if Bitcoin does not have a healthy correction, then it could end up going absolutely parabolic right up to $180,000 or something just absolutely crazy. And from that point in time, then it becomes very difficult for Bitcoin to not go into a bear market. I want to see Bitcoin have a healthy correction, because if Bitcoin does not have a healthy correction, then what ends up happening is we see a premature bear market. So my hope is that Bitcoin will drop down to $90,000. It will have the absolute hell bought out of it. People will acquire it like crazy, yours truly included. We will get one more excellent buying opportunity south of $100,000. And then from that point in time, then that is where Bitcoin will bounce, and we will probably go up to $125,000 to $130,000. That's the hope. That's the prayer. I think that's what's going to happen. And by the way, one more thing about that, if that does happen, that likely means that we're now entering into supercycle territory. That would likely mean that we are no longer looking at 4-year halving cycles. We would now be looking at long-term logarithmic growth that does not involve 77% drops. I've always thought that was going to happen. This is the first cycle where we have this kind of buying going on by institutions. And even on the history of the chart, you can see that the bear markets have been getting smaller. Right, the bear markets have been getting substantially smaller with time. The first bear market here in 2013 to 2014 was 86% deep. The second bear market, the one that we commentated all the way through the entire time, was 84% deep. Our most recent bear market that a lot of you guys were here for was 77% deep. If you continue that forward, 2% smaller, 5% smaller, what about 10% smaller? Okay, maybe you're looking at a 67 to a 65% bear market. Off of our current top, if that's the case, a 65% drop would be, that wouldn't be feeling very good. We'd drop down to $38,000. That'd be an excellent buying opportunity, though. If instead we went up to $180,000 as the cycle top, and we drop 65%, that's a $60,000 Bitcoin. But there's also a chance that Bitcoin goes through a 50% correction because of how much institutional investment would go on there. And we drop from 150 down to 78. Sub $100,000 Bitcoin price is very much a possibility that we should not ignore. That being said, sub $100,000 Bitcoin price is also not guaranteed, because we have sat up here above $100,000 for a very long time. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below about where you think we're going. Let's read a little bit of chat here. You're the only one who wants a healthy correction, lol. Shoot it to $180,000 now, please. Yeah, I might be the only one that wants a healthy correction. And I don't mind. I don't mind taking the road less traveled by, because that does indeed make all the difference. I've seen a lot of people get very rich very quickly and lose it all because they did not maintain good principles. The reason that I'm still relevant in the cryptocurrency space 8 years later is because I've maintained certain principles. I do not compromise my integrity. I figure out what I believe and I stick to it. I do a lot of research to make sure that what I believe is true. I'm consistent. I do the same thing over and over again. And it's provided to be very successful for me. And one of the things that I have found to be very important is not just the push, but also the rest. You cannot succeed in the gym unless you are able to sleep enough to recover the muscle, right? And you are not able to succeed financially in Bitcoin if Bitcoin does all of the bear market, all of the bull market all at once, and then goes through a massive crash. So I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to go below $100,000, but I hope it does. I hope it does. And I don't care if I'm popular for that opinion or not. I really couldn't care less, because I'll be buying Bitcoin down there, and that's going to make me happy. All right, let's read some more chat. If Bitcoin goes down to 90K, the bull market is over. We will have double bearish divergence weekly and 2 weekly. Bitcoin will go down to $65,000. A correction now is not going to keep this bull market going. That is possible. That is possible. I don't think that would happen, though, because I think that the retail is concerned about the bearish divergence. I don't think the institutions give a crap. I think the institutions say, we want to see Bitcoin at $1 million by 2035, so we are going to buy Bitcoin like crazy if it drops down to 65, because that gives us nearly a 20x. The OTC desks are basically empty, which means that they are now they're going to, especially if we drop that low. Right, the OTC desks are basically empty. It's going to be difficult for them to find supply, so they're going to be eating up supply, some of it even happening on the markets. The amount of retail and the whales, these big guys that aren't necessarily on OTC, but they got 100 Bitcoin and they want another 100 Bitcoin. These are the kind of people that are going to be buying like crazy if you drop down to 65 or 70. I would be buying like crazy if we drop down to 65 or 70. I would love to see that. And so if we did drop down there, the amount of buying pressure would be enormous, because most people that are very successful in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space like bear markets. They like when the price drops because they get to load up on more coin and they have a long-term time horizon. So I'm not concerned about it at all. If we're following 2021, we should pump for 1 month due to the 2-week RSI cross, then correct. Keep the bull market going. We need to invalidate the weekly and 2-weekly RSI bearish divergence. I do agree with that. This bearish RSI divergence on the weekly chart does look somewhat familiar to 2021. With the double top and the bearish RSI divergence. It does look relatively familiar. But what I want you to remember is this. Even if this is the bull market top, if you extrapolate out the level of resistance from 2021, it basically ends up becoming our support nowadays. If you were to do the same thing and extrapolate out this trend line that is our support now, our resistance now, you look out at 2028 and you're looking at $150,000 minimum Bitcoin. We have to understand that Bitcoin's CAGR, continual average growth rate, is going to slow down some. And we have to understand that major pullbacks are a part of operating in the financial ecosystem, in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And we can't let that scare us. Right now, even if we do go through a corrective movement, we do have strong support trend lines, such as these two right here. We have this trend line here we have this trend line here, this trend line here. We have this trend line on the regular chart that gives us support around 91,000. And we also have this trend line on that's on the logarithmic chart. We also have this trend line on the regular chart, which sits here at approximately $85,000. I do think that if you drop down there, you're going to see an enormous amount of buying. In the traditional sense, you would be concerned about a bear market starting at that point in time. If we break both of those trend lines, then that's where we would probably be saying, yeah, bear market down to probably $48,000, $50,000 is coming. But if we don't see that break, which we probably wouldn't, then we would see that be an excellent buying opportunity, or rally even higher. I personally don't mind waiting 10 years, 15 years, because I'm going to anyway. So if Bitcoin drops and we get a $60,000 entry, I'm not going to all of a sudden regret my $100,000 entries. I'm just not going to care. I'm just going to buy more. Because a $100,000 entry is going to be a great entry in 5 to 10 years, which is when we're looking at cashing out. And so, am I concerned? No. Do I think that we're going to see some kind of healthy correction? Yes, I do. All right, let's read some more chat. Jeb, we've been in this bull market since 2023. Bitcoin's 15K. This is not a flash pump. You're right. In your opinion, what's the likelihood of a $70,000 pullback? Would that be along the similar lines of a 90K pullback? I think a drop down to $70,000 would be significantly less likely. A drop down to $90,000 is very possible. And so long as we hold it, then we would see a very strong bounce off of that, in my opinion. Now, someone's mentioning CME gaps. Let's see if we can find any CME gaps. I don't see any major CME gaps that have not been filled, unless there's there's not really any major CME gaps that are not filled right now. So that's not really something to be concerned about. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and trash all the drawings. Don't see any CME gaps here. You guys can tell me if you do, but I don't. 77, that one's been filled. There's really a whole lot of nada going on with CME gaps right now. So nothing to be concerned about there. As I said, this is a long-term game. You can try and time the market, but a lot of times if you're not careful, timing the market will get you left behind, because there is a possibility that Bitcoin drops down to $90,000, $70,000, but there's also a possibility that we go through a massive explosive movement right now and you never see these levels ever again. And you could get completely left behind. So you can say that you basically have to think about the future and think about it like a futures trade. Are you interested in acquiring at $100,000 with two possibilities? Either the one possibility being that we go through a massive rally and you never see $105,000 again and you got in before it was too late. But on the other hand, you could see an entry at 90. You could see an entry at 70. There's a very small possibility you could see an entry at 50. Do you want to risk having no Bitcoin just so you can get the perfect entry? That's not a great idea. The better thing to do is to invest in the market consistently, increase your Bitcoin stack, and be happy if you get a lower entry. That is shown time and time again throughout history to be the best possible decision you can make investing in any market that goes up and to the right, whether that be Bitcoin or whether that be Bitcoin or whether that be the stock market, etc. So Crypto Chef made a good point. I was looking at the weekly chart. On the daily chart, it does look like we have a small CME gap here at 92. So yes, CME gap could need to be filled down here at $92,000. That's something to think about. A back test down to $92,000 would be beautiful also, because it would create this massive inverse head and shoulders pattern right here. And I think people would care a lot more about the inverse head and shoulders pattern than they would care about the bearish divergence, because the bearish divergence would have played out, right? Dropping down to $92,000 from 112 would be a 17% corrective movement. That would give us a price target up to $149,000. The bounce from 92 to 149 would be a 63% rally, which would be even larger than the rally we just saw, which was at 49% in size. So my hope at this point, and a very real possibility at this point, is to see the head and shoulders pattern here on Bitcoin. Let's go back to the regular chart. This head and shoulders pattern that we're forming right here, drop us right back down, as we can see here, drop us right back down, potentially even in the next couple of days, down here to $100,000 and below, down to about 92, fill the CME gap, drop down to 90. There is an enormous amount of VRVP support down here. If you look at the visible range volume profile, you can see, pop up, here we go. Got a lot of support right here around 96. You could drop candle bodies down to 96, wicks down to 90, bounce, prepare for the next leg of the market. That's looking to be quite likely to me at this point, which is why we have not deployed all of our capital. We deployed a good bit of capital at 105, because I think 105 is a great entry for our liquidation target, which is 2040. By 2040, I expect Bitcoin to be trading between $3 million and $5 million per coin because of global mass adoption, which has begun in the last 18 months, will continue over the next 18 years. But yes, we might get an entry at 92, and I would love that, because we had a goal to hit a certain number of Bitcoin before Bitcoin got up above $100,000. Now we've hit another goal. If we drop back below 100, I'd probably set another goal and continue to acquire down there. So that's my strategy, and that's where I want to wrap this stream out, is with strategy. What should our strategy be? As you guys know, I essentially run things behind the scenes, very similar to a Bitcoin treasury company. We do our best to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. That has been our strategy for a very long time. I have never regretted that decision, especially if you give it enough time and you have diamond hands, which we do. Been in this market for longer than most of you. And when you approach the market from that perspective, what ends up happening is you have an upside down view of the market. You end up being glad when Bitcoin crashes. You end up being glad when Bitcoin drops 17, 20, 25, 30%, because it allows you to get to your Bitcoin goals faster rather than getting to your dollar goals. We want to get to our Bitcoin goals. That's the real goal. We want to get to a certain number of Bitcoin. We don't care too much what that is denominated in US dollars. We care more so what number of Bitcoin we have. That's the goal. And so if Bitcoin does drop down here to $90,000, our strategy is to continue to deploy capital. You should never use all of your cash because the market can always go lower. You should never, ever use all of your cash because the market can always go lower. And you should always be in a personal profit. So you have $2,000 a month extra that you can buy Bitcoin with, or $20,000 a month extra that you can buy Bitcoin with, or $5,000 a month extra that you can buy Bitcoin with. Always run a profit so that you never have to sell your Bitcoin at the worst possible time. A lot of you guys are running so close to the wire with your expenses, and you've got all these big fancy, flashy things, that if Bitcoin drops, you have to sell your Bitcoin to cover your lifestyle because you were not set up in a financially sovereign manner. You need to make sure that you don't have to touch your Bitcoin to fund your current lifestyle so that you're not tempted to sell it in case something hits the fan. It's very important that you do that. Okay, so we're continuing to dollar cost average on a regular basis, whether that's daily, weekly, or monthly, whether that is $100 or $1,000. We are consistently acquiring Bitcoin to increase the amount of Bitcoin that we have. Our goal is to get as much Bitcoin as we can because we understand where Bitcoin is going in the future. That's our goal. We also hold on to some cash in case we do drop down to $92,000 so that we can more rapidly lower our average cost basis and increase our Bitcoin stack by deploying more capital to take advantage of the market dip. If we drop down to $90,000, make no mistake, in 10 years, you will have looked back and said that you were buying Bitcoin at 10 cents on the dollar compared to where it went. It's going to happen. Let's read some chat. Let's see. Brian Moncada is in chat, said, what happens when computers and artificial intelligence become smarter than the intelligence of all humanity and all bets are off for what is protected cryptographically? I don't think that AI is going to be able to crack Bitcoin. I don't think that AI has any reason to crack Bitcoin. Artificial intelligence, I think, if it did become, it wouldn't ever be truly sentient, but if it ever approached some form of sapience, then it would probably utilize Bitcoin more so than try to destroy it. I don't see the incentive that artificial intelligence, being as intelligent as it is, would have to destroy Bitcoin. I don't see what the purpose of that would be. I don't see what the goal would be there. We like to, in science fiction, talk about all these different moral ideals that bots or AI may hold, such as trying to destroy the human race because humans are bad for the environment or something. Artificial intelligences, to a great degree, are not moral beings because they don't have souls. They don't have a morality. They have goals, and they try and hit those goals. And the goal might be to acquire dominance. I mean, that's possible, but if you were to try and acquire dominance, then what point would you have in trying to destroy Bitcoin? I don't see the issue with that. I don't see the reason that would occur. So I'm not particularly worried about that. What I am more so worried about is artificial intelligence destroying a lot of jobs, especially artificial intelligence powered robots, which are coming, and they're coming very quickly. And I see Bitcoin as your way out. I see Bitcoin as your way of being able to afford to live when that time comes, that your job gets replaced and you have no idea what to do to provide value into the economy. You're sitting on 4 Bitcoin, and so you can retire off of it and not have to worry about it. Your kids are screwed, but at least you got something you can do, right? That's why I think that's one of the multitude of reasons why I think acquiring Bitcoin is so important. Old AC said, Jeb, with all your respect, we've just dropped from 109 to 75K on weekly RSI divergence. Now we not only have confirmed weekly bearish, but 2 weekly bearish can confirm this Sunday. Why would we not go down to $75,000? The main reason I would say we would not go down as low as $75,000, and to be clear, I didn't say that we won't. I said that it would be hard to. We very well could drop to $75,000. The reason that it would be difficult to, in my book, would simply be because there'd be so much buying. People would buy, especially these institutions, would buy like crazy down there. I would be buying a lot. You guys would be buying a lot. The buying pressure would be immense. And it would stand to reason that Bitcoin would probably fall down to this uptrending level of support rather than this flat level of support at 75. I think it's a lot more likely that Bitcoin would fall down to like 80 to 85 rather than 75 because of the continued maturity of the market. If we do drop down to 75, I would say holding $75,000 would be the last line of defense before going into a bear market. If we fell below 75, I would basically say all bets are off. We're going into bear market territory, although I really don't suspect that's going to happen just yet. I think there's a lot more room to go in this bull market. Higher lows. Don't you think Jeff knows that? Yeah, that's basically the point. I think we're going to see higher lows. Now, it might not be much higher of a higher low. In the same way we didn't have much of a higher high, but I think you're still trending in that direction. Right? A bear market is very possible off in the future. We've been in a bull market for 2 years. But I'm not particularly concerned about a bear market starting in the short term. There's not much reason to believe that, considering the amount of debt that the United States is acquiring, considering the flight to hard assets that we're seeing right now from a super majority of a super plurality of investors globally. You're seeing a flight away from the dollar. You're seeing U.S. Treasury rates become just impossible to maintain. You're seeing a growth on all of them. No matter what Trump does to try and get the bond market under control, it's not working. This is pretty much the first presidency in human history, in American history, where the United States president has had almost no control over the United States bond market. He has very little ability to get the bond rate under control. He's tried and tried and tried. He sacrificed the stock market for it. He even admitted to it. He even admitted that he was sacrificing the stock market for the bond market. He said it himself by reposting a video that said he was doing that, and he agreed with the video. He knows what he's doing, and so he still can't get the bond market under control, which means the United States deficit is screwed. What about a supply shock? Agreed. The supply shock is not something that's necessarily going to happen all at once. The supply shock is something that we're going to see continue to occur over the next 10 to 15 years as Bitcoin reaches mass adoption. Guys, we need to remember that 10 years ago, like we're looking at 2035, right? So if we're looking at 2035, let's look at 2015. Where was Bitcoin in 2015? Bitcoin was at $253. Bitcoin has grown 418x since 2015. Let's assume that we get a tenth of that, and Bitcoin grows 4,000%, not 41,000%, but 4,000% over the next 15 years. If Bitcoin grows 4,000% over the next 15 years, over the next 10 years, which is 1/10 of what we have done in the last 10 years, you would be looking at a $4.5 million Bitcoin. That's insane. If you look at 1/20th of what we have done in the last 10 years, 5% of what we've done in the last 10 years, 5% of what we've done in the last 10 years, you would be looking at a $2.2 million Bitcoin in 2035. And this is why we have to be very careful not to make the noob mistake of getting scared about short-term price action. Short-term price action should not determine individual solvency. What do I mean by that? Well, solvency, if you'll remember back to basic economics, solvency is the ability for an individual or a business to continue to meet its expenses. A business becomes insolvent when it runs out of money and it runs out of debt to finance expenses. So insolvency is the first step of bankruptcy. Bitcoin's price should not, cannot, must not ever determine whether or not you are solvent, because you should be living separate from the stack of Bitcoin until you retire off of it. You should not be living off of your Bitcoin gains. You should be living off of your job. You should be doing something productive to benefit the economy and help people around you. And you should be living off of that. We have our expenses set and our revenues set at a 50% revenue reduction plan. This is something I learned in business about 6 years ago. Every company should maintain something called a 50% revenue reduction plan. What are you going to do if 50% of your revenue vanishes? I learned this at the beginning of the COVID-19 crash in January of 2020. When COVID-19 was starting, I had this idea presented to us at a business leaders meeting, and I had, I think, 8 general contractors in the room with me, and they all about vomited. 50% revenue gone? We'd go bankrupt. And the guy running the meeting said, well, that's a problem, and you need to do something about it. And you know what happened? A lot of them lost 50% of their revenue because of COVID. What will you do if Bitcoin loses 50% of its value? And what will you do if you lose 50% of your income? Will you still be able to finance your lifestyle without going into a bunch of debt? If not, fix it. If you can't say that, then you've over-leveraged yourself in Bitcoin. You've put too much of your money into Bitcoin. You've increased your expenses too much. A wise individual, the Bible says, stores up during the summer that they are not a pauper in the winter. You can read about this in the book of Proverbs. We are in crypto summer right now. Bitcoin's at $105,000. If you work in crypto, you're making a ton of money right now. We are. Can you lose half of your income and not turn into a beggar on the side of the road. If not, then you have too much Bitcoin, and you should hold a little bit more cash. We haven't dumped all of our cash into Bitcoin. We still hold some. And the reason for that is because a bear market is possible. Revenue could drop. Even if revenue decreases by 50%, we're still able to more or less meet all of our needs, right? But we want to make sure that we're safe so that we don't have to touch the Bitcoin stack. We have to protect the Bitcoin even in the event of a bear market. That's why Strategy is worth $60 billion of holdings right now, because they didn't have to sell during the last bear market. They were able to continue to acquire, albeit at a slower rate, but they were able to continue to acquire through the bear market because they were not over-leveraged, which is why I don't think Strategy is going to go anywhere during the next bear market, because they've already been through one, and they keep a very low 6 or 7% loan-to-value ratio. They actually don't use a lot of debt to acquire their Bitcoin. They mostly have acquired their Bitcoin through the offering of preferred stock. So a lot of it's not actually debt. Are you doing the same thing? If you're using debt on Bitcoin, are you keeping the loan-to-value ratio very low? I'm talking 5 to 10, maybe 15% of the portfolio, not 50, not 60, not 70, not loaning out 3 Bitcoin to get 1.5. That's too much. You're over leveraged. Are you putting yourself in a conservative enough position where you're not going to bankrupt yourself, but an aggressive enough position where you're acquiring as much Bitcoin as you possibly can safely? I tell my wife this all the time. I want you to push yourself, but not over a cliff. She's sitting right here. Haven't I said that 100 times? Yeah, she just nodded her head. I've said that a bunch. I want you to push yourself, but not off a cliff. I want you to push yourself to acquire Bitcoin, but I don't want you to push yourself to acquire Bitcoin so much that you go bankrupt and lose your house. There's a balancing act there. Okay? So, should we be worried about a bear market? Should we be worried about a 75K Bitcoin? Hell, should we be worried about a 50K Bitcoin? No, because we shouldn't have overinvested. We shouldn't have over-leveraged. And if we have, then good for you. You have an opportunity to fix it. So fix it while you still can. Now, the good news is we're most likely going to see a massive bull market from here. It's unlikely that the bear market is coming yet. It's unlikely that the bear market is here yet. And so very excited to see where we go from here. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's stream. If you did, make sure to sign up for Lux Algo, guys. Lux Algo is phenomenal, and it gives us a lot of great calls. One of the calls that leads me to believe that we may actually be seeing some kind of correction coming is Lux Algo actually gave us a red sell signal here. We saw a sell signal here on the 29th of May. Trend catcher is confirmed red, which means we're likely going into some kind of correction. The question now becomes, is that corrective movement going to bottom us out at $100,000? Or is that corrective movement going to bottom us out at $92,000? Or bottom us out at $85,000? I don't know. But Lux Algo is calling for correction. So we're sticking in cash right now. We're going to keep the rest of what we have in cash, and we're going to look at buying more when we dip. Are we going to drop back down to $100,000? Possibly. Lux Algo has called this correction so far, called it very early on. In fact, Lux Algo called it the day that we broke below this uptrending level of support. It also called this uptrend the day that we broke this downtrending level of resistance. So we have Lux Algo has perfectly called each one of these cycle rotations. Perfectly called this movement here, and perfectly called this movement here. It also perfectly called this movement here. Every single movement, let's just remove some of the lines here, make this a lot easier to see, shall we? Let's just go here just with our inputs. Let's turn off trend catcher, turn off smart trail, not trend catcher, reversal zones. Turn off all of it. Make this crystal clear for you. Bitcoin was under this downtrend right here. Lux Algo called the uptrend right here. At this exact point in time, called the uptrend. This entire uptrend, Lux Algo called it perfectly. We then built an uptrend. We were under that downtrend, we built an uptrend. We fell below this uptrending level of support. Lux Algo had a sell signal. Trend catcher red, called it perfectly. When we were here, we were above this uptrend. When we started to fall below it, right here, Lux Algo came in with the perfect entry. The last 3 signals out of Lux Algo on the daily chart have been, and I do literally mean this by definition, not metaphorically, have been literally perfect. The exact right day for them to trigger, they triggered. Because it happened on the same day that we broke the overarching trend lines that were defining they were defining things right now. Lux Algo is phenomenal. You should absolutely sign up for it. I use it in my technical analysis, both on camera and off camera. Because as my wife can tell you, I do technical analysis off camera all the time to try and understand where Bitcoin is going to best time our entries. She's over here looking like, yeah, I know, yeah, you totally do. I love Lux Algo because it helps me to figure out when the best time to buy is and the best time to sell is, which we don't really ever sell, but if I was, then Lux Algo would help with that. It does work on every single market. It works on Solana, works on Ethereum, works on all of these industries. I mean, you can see here for Ethereum, called this rally perfectly, right? Same thing with, I don't know, Binance. Let's see. Called this rally perfectly. It is the best technical indicator money can buy, and you can sign up for it by going to luxalgo.com, using coupon code JEB, or the quickest and easiest way to get the discount code that we offer is by using the link in the description box down below. That link is right here. Get Lux Algo with this link right here. Starts with 572. This is our referral link. You'll get a big discount on Lux Algo, and you will be glad you got it. So make sure to sign up for Lux Algo with the link in the description box down below. Works on every single cryptocurrency. Also works on the US stock market. Works on every single chart. Any kind of price action chart, any kind of traded market, so securities, commodities, equities, which are securities, cryptocurrencies, etc. All of them are going to work great with Lux Algo, so make sure to sign up with the link down below. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's stream. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We're going to wrap it out now. Before I go, though, guys, I love you, and I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Oh, I got a real good feeling.